Hello and welcome everyone to our first ever video spotlight. Today we're going to be taking a look at Adobe Dimension CC. We're going to be talking about what it does, what its strong points are, and who would need this type of application. So my name's Gary. I'm one of the technicians here at Carasoft, and we're going to be taking a look at the application. So Adobe Dimension is a brand new app released from Adobe that allows you to create photorealistic images out of 3D models. Now, the first thing to note about this application is this does not allow you to create 3D objects from scratch. It's not one of those programs. You can use preset 3D models or even 3D models that you've created in other applications in Adobe Dimension. Adobe Stock also has a number of resources preset for you, a number of different objects and types that you can utilize for the projects you're working on. Now you can take each of these objects, bring them into Dimension, you can brand them, adjust the lighting, adjust the background, and render out photorealistic versions of really whatever you want to put together, saving time and money, allowing you to create full versions of products or branded items so that you don't have to spend the money on them to actually create physical copies or buy expensive photo shoots. So let's take a look at a workflow and we'll bring something into Dimension and we'll render out a final product that we have. So here we are on our splash screen. The actual application is very easy to navigate. So I'm going to go and create a brand new document. It's going to open up and it's going to give me a system check here just to let you know, because this is a 3D modeling application. So it does require a lot of horsepower for your machine. Another necessity is you must be on the latest version of iOS or at least Windows 10 to utilize the app. So it's telling me to switch graphics cards. That's fine. We're going to use the one that we have. I'm going to go ahead and make this full screen, and we can begin looking at our HUD that we have. So there's only two tabs in Dimension. You've got a Design tab and you have a Rendering tab. So the Design tab is where you're going to do all of your work. You have a number of trays over here. If I toggle this up, you can see we have models, materials, different lighting sources, and some stock background images. All of these come directly with Dimension, but of course you can integrate other options from stock or from outside the application entirely. Along the left side, we have a number of modeling tools which will allow us to control the 3D objects, and we have some selection options here along the top bar. We have a rendering preview that we're going to be able to pop out so we can see what our photo is going to look like at the end, and we also have some project controlling options over here where we can actually adjust the lighting and fine-tune things ourselves. We're not actually going to have to do a whole lot of work because Dimension uses Adobe Sensei's technology to completely integrate full application of image matching technology. So when we bring in a photo as a background, it can apply the proper lighting sources directly from that background photo to the objects that you're working with. So let's show you exactly what we're talking about. So first things first, we have to pick a model for what we're going to bring in. And as you can see, coming pre-stocked, you've got a lot of different product options here because that's primarily where this application is focused, branding different objects. So for starters, we're going to take this small twist jar here, and I'm going to place it center stage. It's going to load in. And as you can see, it's sitting flat here, and we have a number of colored controls that allow us to manipulate how it's sitting in our virtual plane here. Now we can adjust this in a number of ways. We currently have the moving tool selected, and by doing that, that means we can move it around. So we can lift it up, set it back down, it snaps to the ground. We can move it left, right, or along any of the other axes that we have. Below that, we can select our next tool, which is the scaling tool, which does exactly what you'd expect. So we can scale the objects, and as you can see, we have complete control over how this looks. So we can completely distort it however we need. You can also rotate around the object by holding down the right mouse key, so you have complete viewing options. We'll recenter that. And then our last tool that we have is the rotation tool, which allows you to rotate your 3D objects. So you have a lot of freedom here with how you want to actually deploy whatever object you're working with. So I'm going to back up because we want to keep it flat. We're actually going to go up to the moving tool, and I'm going to shrink it into the ground a little bit because you have the freedom to do whatever you want. We're going to shrink it down, and we're actually going to turn this into a stand for a sculpture. So we're going to render out an image of what a sculpture would look like, a theoretical sculpture, with a background that's come preset with the application. So let's take a look at this. So once we have the object loaded up, and set. We're going to drag a second one in because you can add as many of these as you want. Your project will increase in size exponentially with each object that you add, of course, but you're not limited by how many 3D objects you have in the frame. So you can drop in as many of these as you need. So we've got this nice sculpture here, and I can do whatever I need to make it match what we're looking at. I think what we're going to do is we're just going to squeeze this down a little bit so that it sits right there in the stand. Now we can use our selection options to select both of them and move them around. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make sure that both of these are selected. I'm going to go ahead and I want to move them directly up, just a little bit higher. There we go. So there we go. So we have our sculpture preset out. So now that we have our 3D objects populated in our main field, we can actually add the next aspect, which is the textures to the 3D objects. So if we open our materials, there's a dozen different options that come preset with Dimension, and there's more available on Adobe stock. So what we're going to do is we're going to make this a gold sculpture. So I'm just going to drag and drop the texture right onto the 3D model, and Dimension does the rest. So that linked the materials because I had combined them and had them both selected. So we actually don't want to do that. So I'm going to back that up. I'm going to make sure that just the sculpture is selected because we want to use two different textures for this. So I'll drag the gold in on just the sculpture, and that will apply. And then we can do two different textures for the stand that we have beneath, or the case that we were using that is now temporarily a stand. So I'm going to come down and we'll pick a marble option here. Drag and drop, it will apply. And then we'll apply a wood to the base. There we go. So now we have our sculpture preset. And if it looks jagged to you right now, if the edges aren't very fine, that's because it's giving you a very low resolution version of what this is going to look like. It's easier in your machine and it saves you time and there's no lag. It puts less horsepower down on your machine. If you want to have a better version of what you're going to be seeing, you can toggle the rendering preview in the corner here. That will give you a final version preview of what this is going to look like when you render it out. So if we give it a few seconds, it'll give us a higher resolution look at what that's going to appear like. Now we don't have a background yet, so we'll close that out. Now everything here is very neutral. If we wanted to, we could come over here and we could completely manually adjust the different glowing options, how the light reflects off of the statue, and all the different selections here. But we're going to let Dimension do it for us. So I'm going to close that category and we'll go into our lights. As you can see, these are all the preset different lighting options. So you can apply these presets if you want. But we also have a number of background images. So we're going to use this city backdrop. So I'm going to bring this down a bit. I think I'm going to zoom out a bit. And we're just going to drag and drop this city background in. Now what you're going to see is that the grid on the floor, what we're looking at, is not aligned with the photo, so it doesn't really match. Now we could manually try and maneuver this around so that it fits into the photo, but Dimension has match image capability, and this will register what it detects from the photograph, both what is in the photo, the actual content, the skyscrapers, the water, the direction of the lighting that's in the photo, and it's going to apply all of that to our 3D sculpture automatically. We can turn these options off if we want to, but we're going to leave them all on and go ahead and hit OK and see what we end up with. So it's going to load in and boom, just like that. So it snaps directly to the horizon of the photograph and it applies the proper lighting. So even the shadows over here are in the right direction. Now we can come in here and we can toggle that off and we can change any of the options that we might need. But for right now, we have a matching 3D object with the image that we brought in. So now if we opened our rendering preview, you would see that it would load up the background as well, and we would get a good view of what's happening. You can see even in the reflection here, you can see the skyscrapers and the surrounding image that's been applied. So there we go. So we have a nice look at our finished object there. And we can close that up. So once you've applied the 3D objects you want and have manipulated them out, if you can drop your brand on there, you can. We're not doing something that's really applicable. But you can simply drag and drop a logo on there from any of the other art pieces you have. Once you're all finished, it's time to actually render out your final product, and you have some standard options for that as well. So I'll go over to the rendering tab, and it's going to ask me the quality of my render. So I can come over to our options here, and I can go low, which is fast, high, which is very slow, and or an intermediate option. If you want the highest render, of course you would go for high. It'll take a little bit longer, but you'll have a very high resolution end product. What's more exciting here is not only we can rename our file, of course, and we can choose our export location, but by default, you can also choose to export either as a PNG or as a Photoshop file, which is really cool. So if we export as a Photoshop file, all of the individual items that have been compiled up to our project will actually be available for us to further manipulate in Photoshop. So the lighting layers, each 3D object, and the background layer, everything is individual and broken up for you. Everything will be organized out. So if you're working on a project and you've done most of your work here in Dimension, you can then automatically turn this into a Photoshop file, take it into Photoshop, and continue to work on it and make it look its absolute best. So I would simply select PNG here, and I would hit render, and that would load up our final product. Now I've already pre-rendered this, so we can take a look at what the low resolution quality render would look like, which is right over here. So I've got my Photoshop file and my PNG. So we can load this up. And for a low quality render, it looks pretty fantastic. Very photorealistic. And you can do this with a number of different settings. So there's tabletops, workspaces, art studios, and of course you can bring in your own images as well. You're by no means limited to what's already provided. Now just to take a quick look at the resources that you can also integrate with Dimension, I have stock pre-pulled up as well. So if we take a look at Adobe Stock, you can see that you have a plethora of other options here. So you can check out 3D models, 3D lighting options, or other 3D materials. We'll just take a look at the 3D models. As you can see, you have thousands of results here, a dozen different things. So you have glasses, jars, pans, lots of different product types, things that you can use to throw your brand on or market to, that you can bring in to a Dimension project and create a really nice looking photorealistic end product that you can then push out to your marketing team or to whoever else may need it. And that's Adobe Dimension in a nutshell. Again, if you guys have any questions, you can reach out to us. We can do a one-on-one trading with anyone. Just feel free to reach out to the team and we can get it all sorted out for you. So I hope you enjoyed our look at Adobe Dimension, and we'll see you next time.